voy a ir empezando. Voy a cambiar a inglés. Thanks first of all, everyone, for joining. A little bit about Landa Talks. This is a space where we bring in more experienced consultants, both from within the community and from the outside too, to basically share tips and tricks and tips of the trade and help us navigate through the journey. So today I'm very glad we're hosting Lorena Sánchez García. She's a brand new member at Landa Club Cohort 5. And in terms of format, what we'll do is 30 minutes of questions that I had prepared, and then we'll leave like around 15 to 20 minutes for questions from the audience at the end. And feel free to leave them in the chat as you go. So welcome, Lorena, and maybe a good place to start is if you could share a little bit about your background, your career, that'd be very interesting.
Super. So for me, I studied chemical engineering. When I graduated, I went to work for Cemex, with the big cement company in Mexico. And I started working for M&As in Europe. I was part of that group for about 4 years, and then I left to study an MBA. And that's actually the first moment when I ever did a consulting project, because I was sponsored. And when I was going to the MBA, before I went, I had some time off and I needed some extra cash in order to have like money for the activities for when I was in the MBA. And so that's how I started my consulting business. Then while I was studying, I always took courses that had some consulting projects where you could get some extra funding for doing those projects. And then I went to work for L'Oreal. L'Oreal was very jealous about us having like other gigs. So I stopped having gigs when I was in New York. But then when I moved to Argentina and worked for Natura, I started having some additional gigs. Then I came back to Mexico and I was part of the team that founded Linio. And when I was in Linio, like obviously there was no time for me to do any consulting projects because like there was barely time to sleep and eat. But like once we sold Linio to Falabella, I started doing some consulting projects with like the new acquired skill set for e-commerce and payments and logistics. And like I basically made that into like more of a business to Founder Institute. And then aside of Founder Institute, like I started taking on more projects for like medium and bigger companies. That's actually how I landed a job at Rappi. I started doing consulting projects for Rappi. And then the same thing for Story, because I started consulting for Story, landed a job there. And right now I'm like actually transitioning out of Story, but continue to be an advisor and continue to do projects for like other types of clients.
That's very interesting, and thank you for that. And maybe a good place to start, since you've been doing it for long, and I'm just curious about it, is did you ever experience imposter syndrome at all? And how did you manage with that?
Yes, I think I experience it still up until now. And like, I think that the key to doing it is not that you're going to feel less fear, but it's more a matter of doing it despite of the fear. It's like the fear is not going to go away, but it's like you have to do it despite of you thinking that the product is still not great, or that you still don't know all of the answers, or that you still feel the uncertainty of whether you would be able to meet like the commitments. And I think that like 95% of the times, like I've been able to sort that out. No, there's been some projects where they didn't go as well as I expected. And I think that there's like a lot of tips that you can gain in order to avoid those pitfalls.
That's super interesting. And at this point, I know you have your practice very structured, right? You have like a productized offering. So that'd be also interesting if you could walk us through that journey to get to a productized offering and what that looks like today and why it makes sense.
Yeah, so like when I first started doing consulting, I was doing consulting of like all sorts of gigs. And like that's also part of when I was telling you about the imposter syndrome and projects that didn't go well. Is like I ended up taking projects of things that I wasn't that good at or that I didn't enjoy as much. And so I started dreading having those projects. But then once I started consulting a lot on like the same topics, I started to realize whenever I went into a very specific niche, which for my case is like very early stage startups, is like most of the times there's like very early trainings that need to be done. No? So for example, if we're talking of tackling, for example, customer support, like there's manuals of how to handle a customer service agent and on how to recruit a customer service team and on how to run software for customer service that is very custom. And so rather than having to reinvent the wheel every time that I consult on those topics, now it's like I already have kind of a product that caters towards that specific service. And like, even though there's things that can change from one customer to other, is like there's like 20% of things that could change, but then there's 80% of the heart and core that are already like a set product that you can just kind of sell off shelf. And so for me, it's like there's like 5 different topics on which I already have products. So I have products on like coaching. And so for the coaching, I have products like for life coaching or products for like performance coaching or for like ontological coaching. And then I also have like these products for like customer support and operations. And then like for growth, like I also have like already like manuals and products that are like very set for like B2B2C and for B2B and for B2C.
That's interesting, and I guess since it's very broad, when you were starting out, and obviously I'm sure that has evolved. Did you ever like think of niching down, like okay, just going to focus on like customer service, or it depended on the clients and what were looking you for work, and I don't know how did you think about that?
It's actually really funny because it's like at the beginning I started consulting for super large companies. Like my very first client was Monterrey Tech and the Mexican government, and I did an entrepreneurship program for them. And so that was like a huge project. But then it was like, okay, how many projects can you do for the government on entrepreneurship? Like there's a very limited amount of the projects that you can do on that topic. And then, for example, after Linio, like I started doing a lot of consulting on e-commerce. In one hand, because it was still very new, and because of that, there was a good price to be paid. Like as it becomes a more well-known skill set and more broad-known skill set, like it's less well paid, and like there's fewer of those engagements that are attractive. And so like that's also part of what has made me like start to pivot. Who are the customers? Now I've had clients like Toyota or like PepsiCo running like some innovation workshops for them, which had a lot of recycling from those entrepreneurship workshops with the government and Monterrey Tech a few years back. But then it's like, for this very early stage, is like most of the times it's like customer service, sales, and some sort of like the very early operations where I focus most on consulting.
Interesting, and I guess thinking about that is how do you think about lead generation and what that looks like today? Like, is it mostly inbound? Do you do a lot of networking? Do you like hop on platforms? What is your mix?
So I think it's a combination of like where you are at in the process, no? So like at the very beginning, there's a lot of networking that you have to do because very few people know you. You might not necessarily have already a reputation on what you're doing. And like, obviously, like as the business grows, referrals become the biggest source for the business. But like up to you to start receiving like enough referrals so that the business is doable. You need to have about like 20, 25 customers so that they can start giving you more projects and like kind of growing exponentially for that. So for the very first 20, I think it's a combination of like people that you know speaking about what you do, even in places where you think like, oh, nothing to see. Like if you have the birthday of one of your aunts, that you actually bring it on, because like sometimes there's people in that party that can know somebody or that might have a project that you might do and that might help you grow your business.
That's interesting, and I was wondering, then say everything is working, and you have many clients at the same time. Do you have any time management tips or what that looks like today for you?
Yeah, so like that's the biggest concern, like for whenever you have a project, because I think there's 2 or 3 things that can happen whenever you get the projects, no? Either that you don't have, And so you have a lot of time off. And that time off is the one that I try to use so that I can productize the offering. And then whenever you have clients, like it tends to be that then you may have a lot of clients at the same time. So for example, if you're talking to many and then they start to like slow down for you to do the closing, and then all of a sudden you end up with 4 or 5 clients at a time, then it starts becoming very challenging. So like for me, it's a lot about like managing the expectations of whenever we start working for the timeline, especially like if it was because they delayed something of paperwork or something that we didn't start working on the time we first committed. Like I can be very transparent and tell them like, hey, I know you need this for fast. You took longer for like signing the contract or for like negotiating and bringing it to whomever is the responsible of giving you the money. And so unfortunately I'm now committed. And so I need to like change how the deliverables are going to happen. Or like I know that these are the ones that matter to you the most. So I'm going to work on them. And like I try to like negotiate among clients also based on like the lifetime value that each of those engagements can have. Because some of them might be like a smaller engagement, but that then is going to bring on more bigger engagements.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some are like probably a one shot. So those that are like a one shot, like probably they get less of my time and my attention than those where I know that there can be more business.
Interesting. And I think that's a good segue to ask you about how do you think pricing wise, like do you have different prices for different types of clients? Like for coaching, I'm sure that you have a set price, or if the company is smaller or larger, what does that mix look like?
Yeah, so for me, what I try to do is that I try to like split my hours between the size of the clients. And I basically say like, okay, I want to have like 4 clients that are small, 2 clients that are very big, and then 2 medium clients, no? And so for the very big clients, they are probably the ones that are paying the most money per hour and the ones that are consuming the least of your resources, but that have like the deliverables that might be like the most tailored made. Whereas the other 2 like might end up with a more productized type of offering. And so that's part of what allows me to make like this portfolio. In the case for startups, like a lot of the times I might be charging them with the Founder Institute engagements letters. So like basically those grant you equity in exchange for what you're working. But some of the times I basically tell them like, hey, you know what? An hour of my time is worth $300. I know you still don't have that amount of money. So you're going to pay me $1,000, but then you're also going to give me this amount of equity. We're going to sign this document, which is a standard commitment. And that's how we're going to work. And these are going to be the deliverables. Like that can be one of the ways to do it with the smaller companies.
And that's a good point to like double click on. How has that worked for you? Like charging in equity, was that too big of a hassle with the paperwork? Were those investments successful, or it's more of I'm helping out and we'll see type of situation?
What I've seen is there's been a little bit of everything, but I think that the easiest is like whenever you do the advisor sheets, like this advisor agreement, for example, from Founder Institute is like super standard, like because you get the fast for the advisory relationship from the get-go. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. If you're not, let me leave you here the link. Basically, the FAST already establishes like, okay, how many hours are you going to be devoting? Which stage is the company at? And you just fill it out and it goes immediately into like the vesting capabilities, because it's kind of a hybrid between an ESOP and like equity that is kind of dormant. And so that's kind of the easiest way to do it. In my experience, like a lot of the very early stage obviously fail. And so that's part of the reason why I also like charging them some amount of money in cash. It might be like not an amount that it's like prohibitive for them, but it's something that allows to fund the bills and like to give you some runway while you're like becoming a very active angel investor.
Interesting. I guess along the same line, I don't know if you could share any nuances of working with these different types of clients, right? Like, what do you like of working with like large enterprises, or and what is more fun of working with early stage startups? What do you prefer?
So working with large enterprises, it's cool because you can charge them more. But like there's like, I think 2 or 3 things that are more challenging. Like the first one is obviously the negotiation piece takes a long time. The second is like, in order for you to become a vendor of them, it's also a long time. So you end up being paid more money than what you would per hour if you were working at a startup, but you won't get paid until like 120 days after. And a lot of them don't pay you until after you finish the project. So it could be that, for example, once with PepsiCo, I started working for them in January 2018, and I didn't get paid until like March 2019.
Oh, wow.
And so you have to be able to like not necessarily need the money for survival whenever you're selling to the big ones, but it's a big chunk that can help you for savings. With the very early stage, obviously, like they are more demanding of your time a lot of the times. And like this thing that I was telling you, like just out of probabilities, the chances of them surviving are very slim. For me, I think what I like the best is Series A and afterwards. Why? Because by Series A, they already found market fit. A lot of the times they are starting to expand into a new market. So there's enough of creative work for expansion, but not as much burden on like, if we don't find market fit, we'll die tomorrow. And also like at this moment of time, they can start to pay you like better fees, and like you receive less equity in exchange. So like there's more guaranteed upside at the end. Like as teachers in business school used to say, no, cash is king. And so that's the one that guarantees that you have cash.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess let's look at the other side of the conversation, maybe. So what would you say were some of the bad experiences you had, if any at all, like as an advisor or an external consultant? Anything interesting to share?
I think there's 2 occasions that I can think of them being like very bad projects. Like one is when I was doing a project for an e-commerce for one of my best friends, who didn't have a lot of idea of like how to run tech. Like she was very savvy about her traditional business. She had a brick and mortar business that was quite successful. And so I ended up not only spending a lot of time on like creating the e-commerce and delivering it to her, but actually like on teaching her digital. And so that was like one of these first learnings of like, you end up devoting way more time than what you have budgeted, and you get less money. And like, since it's such a close relationship, then you start beginning like to feel more fearful of like saying, hey, you ran over your hours, so I need to charge you more. And especially because like most of these people who are friends, like they expect you to do it for free. So it's like, it hurts the relationship from the moment you first charge them, and it hurts them even the relationship even more if you didn't do the right math for what you were selling to them.
And these days, do you have some sort of criteria if like a friend comes and asks you to help out in a project?
I typically tell them to go with someone else after that one, unless like I know that it's a business that it's no longer kind of a family business where they are like the sole owners. Like if they have co-founders, and then I could search for the co-founders to be actually the ones managing the relationship rather than the person who is a friend.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I have one more question. I think we run through those really quick, so that's good. Like generally speaking, if you were to give advice to some of the professionals we have in the community that are starting in their journey to consulting, like what would you say? What do you wish you had known when you first started? Any general advice?
I think for me, there's 3 biggest learnings. The first one is that you're always going to be fearful about selling. And like these sales are specifically or particularly challenging because you're selling yourself. And like for me, it was very challenging because I had always been in commercial. Like I was in commercial for a long time. And I was like, how come I can sell like these awkward payment methods or like this marketplace and I cannot sell the consulting? Well, obviously because the product is myself, and then it meant that I needed to trust the product, and I wanted for the product to be perfect. And the product is never going to be perfect because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all fallible. So like for me, that was the first learning. The second learning is that it's very valuable to also fire your customers and to be very picky about the customers you choose. Like a lot of times at the very beginning, you're like, okay, I'm going to take just any project because I need to prove that I can do this so that I can transition out of a job that I have, or so that I have more runway to continue trying my own startup or like something like that. And it's like, if you don't choose the right customers, that ends up costing you more on the long run, because then it's going to be customers that are not going to be satisfied, that are not going to be happy, that are not necessarily going to recommend you. And also like these are going to be customers that are going to take you more time than what you had budgeted. And especially if you're balancing it with something else that you're doing, like if you still have a full-time job, or if you're trying to begin a company, or if you're trying to save your own company, then like running into this, like at the end of the day, will cost you more than the benefit that it would have brought you. And so the third piece is like for you to know what a good customer looks like, no, and to have a lot of clarity on what a good customer looks like. And so a good customer is somebody who like is very aware of what they want. Like for me, it's a matter of like asking 5 core questions. So the first one is like, what is that issue that they have? For like how long they've had it? What have they done about it? Why is it important for them to solve it? And then how does solving it look like? And like basically answering those 5 questions is what makes the whole difference on you understanding what's especially important on what they need, why it's important, and also like those questions about what have they done in the past to solve it give you a lot of understanding on whether this is going to be a good customer or not.
That makes a lot of sense because actually, and I'm sure this has happened to you, that many times you'll go to a discovery call with a like prospect, and they think they have a problem, and you end up like working on something completely different, like after walking through the process and asking some good questions. Cool. So I think that's it from my side. I'm gonna open it up to the audience. So anyone, if you want to ask a question, feel free to just ask, or if you want to drop it in the chat, that works as well. Go ahead, Giuseppe.
Hi. Thanks, Lorena. Thanks for that. Can we go back just 1 second to choosing your niche? Because we assume we're all very skilled individuals on this call. That said, we are not masters of every subject, and there is a trade-off between credibility and casting a wide net to originate as many leads possible. What was your process, and did you focus on? Did you have in mind just 1, 2, or 3 specialties, etc.? And sorry, another small question, if we have time, is did you set up a consulting firm as such? Did you set up a website to give you credibility or to originate leads? There's a kind of a debate about that, whether it's necessary or not. I mean, it's very cheap now to do that, but I didn't come to a conclusion about that.
So for that, I'll tell you, like I actually created kind of an entity. It was called Orrington Partners. The reason for that name was because that was the name of my dorm when I was in Kellogg. And so that business name continues to be valid. Like I still own the domain and the email, but most of my clients come by recommendation. So it's no longer useful for me to have a website. It's more like the deck that I have and how I explain them, how I've helped other customers. And since most of them come recommended, then it's a completely different beast, because they tell you, like, whenever you're introduced to the new client, like it might be somebody who's a former client of yours. So they tell you like, hey, she's helped us structure operations in our firm. And so they expect you to also help in operations in their firm. Or like she's helped us with leadership and coaching. And so there's already the expectation that you'll help them with the same problem that you helped that first customer. And so that's kind of the answer to the last question. To the first question, which was like for the lead building and how to choose the niche, I think that I didn't necessarily choose the niche. I think that the niche ended up choosing me in every single of the opportunities that I had for consulting. And I'll give you the example. Like before I went to business school, when I had worked for Cemex, I did a lot of work in e-learnings, because part of my job at Cemex was basically first doing the kind of like the product people, like raising what were the issues that we wanted to solve with technology, then writing the specs. The developers would do the software and they would ship it to me, and so that I do QA. And then from there, I had to train users. But I was so lazy at training users one-on-one that I started creating e-learnings. And so I had become a good specialist on how to create content for e-learnings. And so my very first project had been an e-learning project for the government on entrepreneurship and for a university. Then, for example, like in Linio, like I see Dennis here, like he was also with me in Linio, like we became specialists on e-commerce. And back then, doing e-commerce, like there was people that you could count with the fingers of your hand that knew how to do e-commerce. So you would have a lot of projects that needed help on e-commerce. And back then, since like e-commerce was still something very broad in terms of like, I need help with e-commerce, like there was not somebody that needed help with payments in e-commerce or with logistics in e-commerce. Because it was still very new, and like it was like basically creating websites for people so that they could sell. But then as the business started to mature, then you started asking for people who were doing growth, like paid social for e-commerce. And that's part of what I tell you, that niche stopped being interesting for generalists and it became more attractive for specialists. And that was basically part of what also caused me to switch, because I had been coaching founders through Founder Institute. And so I was starting to become very good at the early stage, but also at the creation of processes at the later stages, like with the Rappies of the world and the Stories of the world. And so rather than trying to consult on something that is different or very new to you, I'd rather use the equity that you already have as a person and what you are known for. And a lot of the times we don't know what we're known for. So there another recommendation is go and ask 5 friends who have worked with you that no longer work with you to tell you what they think you're great at. And that's going to be the niche that is going to choose you, because that's the equity that you already have.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, Lorena, how are you? Nice to meet you. This is Manuel. What would you say that at which point did you, like, do you make the majority of your income through your own consulting? Do you also have another job? And how was that transition, like percentage-wise? How much of your desired income were you able to achieve, and how quickly through consulting?
Super. So let me give you like a full disclosure. Like, so I'm a person with 20 years of work experience. Out of those 20 years, the last 10 have been in C-level roles. So my salary from a traditional job was already quite high. And so basically for me, consulting, it's a matter in which I diversify my income. So in my case, I have 5 different businesses. I have a venture capital fund, which is right now probably 20% of my time. I run an accelerator called Founder Institute, which is about 10% of my time. And then I have a hybrid between a consulting practice and a coaching practice. And actually my practice became more valuable now that I'm able to mix between both of them. Because a lot of what I've learned is at the beginning, it was more a matter of people wanting knowledge. Then it became a matter of connecting people with regards to network. And then it became a matter of like how to shift the mentality so that they could achieve more. And that's also what has made me pivot the productized offering that I have. And so that's where I'm spending probably most of my time in that part. I also have an e-commerce business, and that also takes about another 10% of my time. And the way in which I supplement it is like I give conferences as well. And so that also helps with the leads for new businesses, as well as like the customers that I've already had who are happy and who could keep recommending me.
Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations.
Any other takers?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. Lorena, first of all, thank you for your time. So I'm curious how you've handled some of the early situations that didn't go well. If you just kind of tried to cut it off, as soon as possible, or if you, kind of played it out just to see, if it could work out. But I guess a couple questions here, like, what do you do when you feel like things aren't going as planned and you're not delivering the right results? And yeah, just kind of anything you've learned from those types of experiences.
So I'll tell you what I do now, and I'll tell you what I used to do in the beginning. In the beginning, I was the idiot who stayed, and that's part of what I tell you of how important it is to be able to fire your customers. What I do now is I bring it to the table and say like, hey, this is what we've been working on. And it might be a combination of 4 or 5 factors, no? Like, one is when I started to discover this question in the discovery of like, what have you done in the past to solve this problem? It gave me a lot of insight, because if I'm the 10th consultant that is trying to build the paid social campaigns for someone, I know that the chances that I succeed are going to be very slim. I'm not going to be the 11th. I'm not God. Like, it ain't going to work. Whenever somebody's told me that they've tried solving the problem internally and that they didn't succeed, I'd go double click on that, on why they didn't succeed. Because a lot of the times when that thing happens is because there might be something political that hasn't happened. And the reason why I go double click on that is to understand where that political situation happens because they work for the same company and they need a new set of eyes, or if it's because there's like a big divide and it will be very hard to like make it work. And then the third type of problem that I have encountered for that is when people doesn't have time, and like that they haven't solved it because they didn't have time. And at the end of the day, you're not a full-time employee from them. You don't have access to all of the information, and you're not going to be a lot of the times the one implementing. And so ensuring that you have that resource and that resource is not shared. And like whenever, like I actually, it's something that I bring to the table whenever they start telling me that they didn't have time. So I tell them like, hey, how are we going to ensure that we don't fail? By addressing that we have time this time. And if they start to sleep on the deliverables, I actually have clauses on the contract of like, if you start slipping off because you're not giving me the deliverables, I'm gonna break up the relationship. Like, we're gonna leave it in there. And it's a lot about you knowing that you're not doing it only for the money, but that you actually want to help people achieve the results that they want to do. And for me, since helping them achieve what they want without getting lost in the way is my purpose, then it's like, I know that if they are not achieving what they want and they are getting lost in the way, I'm not meeting my purpose. So it's better for me to just clear the air and say like, hey, I don't think we're getting to the results that we wanted. These deliverables have slipped. I've already given you one notice. I'm only giving you the second one, and the next time I'm out.
I guess one quick follow-up question, because you mentioned kind of internal resources, a very practical question. What has been your approach, right, with certain projects where you recognize that you'll need to like work with other teams internally? Do you try to position yourself to kind of manage those cross-functional relationships directly and request kind of the ability to work with other people, or is it all just liaisoning through your direct kind of point of contact?
I think it depends a lot on what the proposal and the original problem is and how much you need that part in order to succeed on what you're delivering. For example, if you're coaching somebody on leadership and you eventually want them to start doing, is like probably you're going to start being the acting COO or the acting salesperson, but you'll be training people so that you start delivering that people and like turning it, like passing on the relay to them. Whereas, for example, if you're thinking of a project where it's more a matter of like strategy and there needs to be a conversation or a discussion between two areas, then you also might be the one who's doing those discussions, especially if you had those types of projects where they couldn't reach agreement and you're going to be the mediator. But other than that, if you didn't sell an implementation, you're only the one saying, and you always have a clear counterpart of who's receiving what you're giving.
Cool, thank you.
And a lot of the times when we're first starting, we think that we're doing it for the good of the company and think that you're making them more of a disservice if you do it that well, because it means that they won't be able to be self-sustainable. And it's as if you were acting like a how do you say muleta? Like a
crutch.
Like a crutch. So like if you were a crutch for somebody, which is okay, well, they have a broken leg, but once the leg is healed, if they continue to use a crutch, then they'll never walk on their own.
Any other takers? Still have some time.
Yeah, I had another question, Lorena. How do you charge? What's your preferred way of charging your clients? Is it like a retainer? Is it hourly? How do you determine that?
Depends on the type of projects. For projects that I know that are longer, and that's part of what I told you about how I build the portfolio. So I tend to have clients where I have a retainer. That's typically with the largest clients. Then with the medium ones, it tends to be like a project-based. And with the smaller ones, it's a hybrid between a retainer and this part of the equity that I told you.
I'm happy to go with one as well. And this was particularly interesting considering how diversified you are, Lorena. Congrats for everything you're doing and probably will do as well. How do you handle time off? Right, I'm curious. This is usually very, very hard, especially considering like the amount of projects you're involved in. But how do you leave out time for yourself, prioritize mental health, all that?
That tends to be the hardest, to be honest, because it's like sometimes whenever you have a client that is like slowing down, it might be the ramp-up process for someone else when you have several clients. And so that's what can cause you most of the burnout. For me, it's like I shut down the business most of December. And that's something that I actually like speak to my clients from the get-go. And I shut down 2 weeks in the summer. And like those weeks never change. That way it's something that it's already negotiated from the get-go. Because like it's easy to try and manage when you have 1 or 2 clients. But whenever you have more than 4, it becomes very challenging if you don't put these types of rules. And the other thing that I have as a rule for myself is like weekends. Like I try not to work on weekends so that I actually like chill out and like actually like there's more thing to that cheating. Friday afternoons, like my weekend starts Friday at 11. And a lot of times I try not to work on Fridays. Like if I can, I do everything that it's in my power so that I don't have anything on Fridays. And so that way, like you also create like these mini breaks all of the times. And like, if you need the time to like work on the strategy for your business or to learn something, then you can put it in there. But if you are burning out and need a break, like that's when the break will happen.
No, fully aligned. And I actually have one more, which is it's around employer confidentiality. Especially since you've had a lot of consulting gigs turning into full-time roles, and usually particularly clients might be interested in tapping into very specific industry knowledge, right? How do you handle that particularly, right? Like if, for example, Nu were to look for you and want to get a little bit more insights into how your work with story developed, how did you handle that? Anything from the legal side, just managing expectations. I'm curious to hear your take.
Those are completely off for me. Like whenever I'm working for someone, like they kind of get my fidelity for that amount of time that I'm working with them. After I finish working for them, then I can engage with some of the competitors. But even in those cases, like I have never needed to go work for any of the competitors, to be honest. I think there's a lot of water in the sea. And it's better to have enemies than friends than enemies. So it's like, unless you have a super specific type of skills that cannot be transferable to other industries, I think there's always a lot of value that you can deliver to other types of industries. And that would help you like stay out of trouble, because also like those legal implications on what's on your NDA and what's not, then it becomes like very challenging. And TBH, I tend to be somebody who's very open and very transparent. So I don't think I have enough guts to have those filters myself. So I'd rather stay out of trouble.
Thank you. I actually got super curious, Lorena, about time management, so I'll sneak in one more. Do you use any sort of framework or project management tool to organize your project, what's important, what's not? For example, I use the Eisenhower matrix, but I don't know if you have any framework you use. I'm super curious about that.
I do, and I don't use the Eisenhower matrix. I use kind of a Lorena's version of the matrix. And basically what I do is like, I have like a planner for the whole quarter of like what I need to achieve in that quarter. Then I do like the planning for the month of what needs to be achieved on the month. Then I go all the way down to the weekly basis. So like every Monday, early in the morning, it begins like the planning for the week. And then every day in the morning, I actually like create what are the top 3 things that I need to achieve on a day. And so those are the first 3 things that get done. And then from there, anything else is vanity. And I know that the amount of things that I have to achieve in a week cannot be more than 15, because there's only 5 days in the week. And I try to work only 4 days. So I try to aim at not having more than 12 important things to do in a week.
That's super insightful. Thank you. Do we have any last takers?
I'm just going to say hi real quick because we work together.
Okay.
Hola, Lore.
Hola, Marita. ¿Cómo estás?
Fuera de Lotus, finalmente.
Muy
Qué gusto
bien.
saludarte. Luego te echo un mensajito para hacer un catch up.
Súper, qué padre, sí.
Nos vemos. Yeah, sorry about my interruption.
No worries. Do you have anyone else? If not, we can start closing out. Oh, I guess not. Thanks again, Lorena, for your time. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope that was useful and insightful. I know it was for me. Yeah, we'll also share the recording. So if you missed any part at the beginning, you'll be able to watch it later.
Thanks a lot, Lore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lorena.
everybody. All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.